All right, guys, I see everybody filtering in, which is fantastic. You know, that's always a scary point for me when you hit start webinar. You just hope people are showing up to hear what you got to say. So thank you guys for hanging out with us today. I want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded for playback. If you have any questions, please post your questions in the chat window or into the Q&A. And guys, I can't tell you how excited I am for Kelly Wright to be here with us today to talk about what to expect when you're expecting a career in GIS. And I think this extends to early career professionals, mid-career, or even tenured career professionals. Guys, Kelly is amazing. She is fantastic and is such an energetic presenter. I'm so happy that she's here with us. And with that, Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take this away.
Hi there, my name is Kelly Wright. I'm a GIS program manager at a consulting firm in Ohio. I do GIS consulting for an architecture and engineering firm. I apologize in advance that my video is not working, but you can still see my screen. And I also apologize in advance because I have a lot of stuff to go over in a very short period of time, and I talk very fast. So make sure to put your questions in the chat, and Drew will feed those to me during our Q&A section at the end. So with that, let's get into it. Today, we're going to be talking about what to expect when you're expecting a career in GIS. My story is that I had a bachelor's degree in geography from 2004 and was living below the poverty line for about 10 years, and then came across an opportunity to get a GIS certificate and took it. That GIS certificate led to my master's degree, which led to a job at the Ohio Department of Transportation as an intern, and later to be a GIS specialist at a architecture and engineering firm. So I have actually only been in this role at LJB for about 4 years. And 2 years prior to that, I was at the Ohio Department of Transportation. And 2 years prior to that, I was slinging fish at a fish store. So this is something I feel very passionately about, making sure that people learn what an early career in GIS looks like, and also learn that your career path may not be the same as somebody who gets an MFA or an MBA and goes straight out of school and feet first into a career. So let's go ahead and keep on trucking. So that is not changing on my screen. Drew, are you seeing my slides change?
I am not. No, Kelly. No, I'm
there we go. Okay. All right. So these are the basic questions that were in the blurb. You know, I'm done with school. Now what? What's the best way to find a job? What are my education and training options? What does a career in GIS look like? What certification is there and might be right for me? And why is my resume not getting me interviews? So today we're going to be talking about GIS as a verb versus GIS as a tool, using versus doing GIS. We'll talk a little bit about GIS education and certification. I'm going to make some assumptions that for the most part, people will have a little bit of education in geography, computer science, or GIS. We'll talk about internships and networking, professional organizations and GIS user groups, what skills we're looking for in the GIS job marketplace, and a little bit about the job search, resume, application, and interview. And we'll follow up with a little tiny bit about negotiation, because that is incredibly important and it's not something that gets taught in school. So when I talk about GIS as a tool versus GIS as a platform, I mean that I do GIS for a living as a verb. I don't use GIS as a tool in my work. I have done both. Applied GIS is very useful, especially for people who specialize in other fields. So an engineer might specialize in GIS and use GIS. An environmental scientist might use GIS, but I actually do GIS, database design, data governance. I'd set up web mapping applications for different public and private clients so that they can manage their assets with mobile work. And that all sounds super fancy, but the idea is that I actually am a subject matter expert in GIS versus being a subject matter expert in something else that uses GIS as a tool to get that work done. So GIS as a job involves data governing. You might do spatial analysis, remote sensing or photogrammetry, LiDAR, UAV, UAS as in drones, application development and programming and cartography. So those are typically divided between raster and vector GIS. Raster is going to be your imagery, your digital elevation models, and you're going to be doing a lot more classification and analysis with those. Vector GIS is points, lines, and polygons, and that's kind of what I've staked my career on. Jobs in GIS involve, you've basically got three options: private sector, public sector, and nonprofit. I have worked in the public sector and in the private sector, and that could involve working for a city, a state government, a municipal government, an agency in one of those governments, tribal government, and there's just a couple of things listed here: Department of Defense, Department of Energy, EPA, Natural Resources, U.S. Geological Survey, Department of the Interior, NOAA, and the CDC. And that's just a tiny fraction of the number of agencies that actually use GIS in the day-to-day operations. So in consulting, I work in architecture and engineering, but I could just as easily just be a straight GIS consultant. I do a lot for public and private clients, both. And then what Datamark GIS and Drew specializes in is public safety. So fire, police, EMS. You'll hear a lot of people talk about Next Gen 911 or the location-based response system, depending on which states you live in. Transportation GIS is quite common and lucrative. It's a little bit more of a specialized field. I mean, these are all specialized. And then utility GIS. So I do a lot with water, wastewater, stormwater, oil and gas, and telecom. Fiber is another common network type that you might find in GIS. So when we're talking about jobs in GIS, construction and engineering is a fairly common one. Planning and zoning, not something that you might think about, but those are people, auditors generally use GIS a lot with their parcels and zoning classification. Real estate, we've all heard of Zillow, right? Public health is definitely in everybody's sphere right now with COVID. There's been a lot of leaps and bounds in GIS. I'm sure that most of us here have seen the Johns Hopkins COVID dashboard, which represents near real time infections, deaths, recoveries, and vaccinations throughout the world. A lot of people have been introduced to GIS because of that. So in some ways, the pandemic has actually increased interest in this field. Parks and recreation. I mean, who doesn't want to work for the National Park Service and develop maps of beautiful, backwoods locations? I would love to do that. Everybody wants to do that. Cartography is quite the sought after field, or people want to do it. Travel, I mean, Expedia, that's GIS, right? I mean, it really is. If you think about it, you're taking data and you're providing spatial context to it in order to give it greater depth of meaning and information. Commerce, site suitability analysis, tracking, logistics, packages going from one place to another, least cost paths. I'm just starting to throw out different tools that we use in GIS to do these different jobs. And then academia, colleges and universities. So we'll have a little bit more to talk about with colleges and universities in a couple minutes, but that is another option, especially at the community college level. You can figure out a way to teach GIS there, and you got a nice little side gig. And then another route into GIS is information technology. And so some people will start with a geography background, which was me. There's people who come in from the IT background, and then there's people who come in from an engineering background. And yes, there are multiple other ways into GIS, but those are probably the most common groups from which people who do GIS are selected. As far as education, we talked about community college, there's associate's degrees. And to be honest, if you're looking for the fastest way to get a job that's going to pay you at minimum $14 an hour in the United States, and you don't want to wait tables and you don't want to serve drinks, go get some education at a community college or an associate's degree or GIS certificate, because once you have that in hand, you can go be a GIS technician pretty much anywhere. And I know for sure that no matter what happens in my career, I'm never going to make less than that, because I can always go digitize some polygons somewhere. I have a bachelor's degree in geography. There are more and more programs than now that are offering bachelor's degrees in GIS, but typically it's a bachelor's degree in something else with a certificate or specialization in GIS. And that GIS certificate is actually how I got into this field. So I saw a targeted ad on LinkedIn letting me know that I could get my GIS master's degree in 2 years. I found out that became a reality, an option for me. And chose to do that. So I went to the University of Southern California's online spatial sciences program, and it was amazing. I mean, it has definitely been a game changer for me in terms of my professional development, both from a job perspective, but also from an outreach perspective like this, understanding that as non-traditional students, it's very difficult to know what you need to do next. You know, when I started searching for jobs 12 years ago, we didn't have Indeed.com. We had Monster and Craigslist, which I don't recommend Craigslist to try and find a job, just throwing that out there. So I got my GIS certificate, which then enabled me to get my master's degree, even though my bachelor's, I only graduated with a 2.7 GPA. So because I went in through the certificate program first, I was able to then get enough credit and the thumbs up from the university to go ahead and get that master's degree. I actually don't know anybody with a PhD in GIS. I know several PhDs who use GIS, but the sad fact is, and this might make a lot of people in academia angry, so if you're there, cover your ears. Sad fact is, if you get a PhD, you are probably going to be overqualified and underpaid in the public sector for the remainder of your career. And we need to think a lot about what your career longevity looks like from the beginning. So if you are not going to be teaching in academia, there is not that much of an incentive for you to get a PhD unless research really is where your heart lies and you've got a good path to a long career there. In addition to college, we've got certifications, the GISP certification. I definitely encourage you to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do webinars as well that teach about the GISP certification, the steps needed to get there, and some tips and tricks to help you get there a little bit faster. And Esri, which is, if you're not familiar, Esri is kind of the software game in the GIS world. They have some technical certifications that you can get, but the GISP, the GIS Professional Certification, is software agnostic, meaning that it's not an Esri certification. I take this certification with me forever. It doesn't matter which version of the software I'm using. And I get letters behind my name, which was super cool. Continuing education is always a good option. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And I also highly suggest a couple of alternate routes, like LinkedIn Learning, formerly lynda.com, and Coursera have a lot of GIS classes on there that you can take. And then Esri themselves offer massive open online courses, or MOOCs. There's a very good one going on right now by Kenneth Field, who is probably one of the premier cartographers in the world, at least in my book. And he wrote a book called Cartography Period a couple of years ago, and he and John Nelson from Esri are teaching this massive open online course to about 16,000 people right now, so highly recommend it. One thing that I didn't think enough about when I was in my undergrad was internships. This was not that common at the time. Anymore, it is extremely common and almost necessary in order for you to get a leg up, because you have that issue where you need experience to get a job, but you need the job to get experience. And it's the chicken and egg conundrum. So the internship is the way to do that. But here's a couple things about that. Number one, you need to be in a paid internship. If you are not being paid, you need to find a different internship. Internships help you build skills and make lasting connections. I didn't understand that by working at the Ohio Department of Transportation. I worked in 3 different departments there, 6 months each, that I was going to be establishing relationships that would help me for the next 10 years. And so keep that in mind, that internships, it's not just a place for you to get good at something, but it's also a place for you to meet people. And we'll talk a lot about networking here in a moment. This helps you build a professional reputation. I already had a reputation before I left ODOT, because I started going to conferences, I started presenting, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But it's a good place to build your reputation, and you want to make sure it's a good reputation, right? You don't want to get a reputation for showing up late and doing bad work. You want to get a reputation for being willing to be there, eager to learn, and willing to help others. Internships also find out if you're a good fit. So I had I had the internship at ODOT, and I found out I was not a good fit for ODOT. It was a great launching pad, but it was not a place where I wanted to settle for the rest of my career. And then the internship helps you get that real world experience. And I usually have a bullet point on here that says, don't get coffee, meaning you're not there to serve people coffee. You're there to learn actual skills. Are they going to be boring? Probably. Are you going to be overworked and underpaid? Probably. But this is going to be really valuable later on for your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So with regard to that, networking is incredibly important. So while I didn't understand in my undergrad how valuable an internship would be, I very quickly, when I was in the graduate program at the University of Southern California, realized that I didn't have a group of people that I was coming out of school with. It was online. It was everybody was quite individual. We were all over the world. So I needed to make sure that I was helping myself along the way, because nobody is going to advocate for you except for you until you start building relationships. And then by networking and establishing relationships with people in the industry and seeking mentorship, then you do have people to go to bat for you. I recently interviewed for a new job and found out that the person I was interviewing with had heard of me from 3 different people. That's important. That was a big selector in whether or not they wanted to hire me, was the fact that they had heard good things about me from other people, people that I didn't even necessarily know, but had been to my webinars and had been to see me speak at public events, and really understood that I kind of know what I'm doing. I have LinkedIn starred here because I get a lot of requests on LinkedIn. Everybody does, right? You see people who have thousands of connections, but I have a kind of a standing rule that if people reach out to me via LinkedIn and they don't put a personal message, why do I want to connect with somebody I don't know? So what I would highly suggest is if you are ever reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn, go to their actual LinkedIn page on a web browser. And then when you click connect, it'll give you an option to ask if you want to send a personal message. And the answer is yes. You must send a personal message to somebody. Say, hey, Kelly, I heard your presentation this week about what to expect when you're expecting a career in GIS. I'd love to connect and continue the conversation. Boom, you're in. If you don't send that to me, probably not. And that's not just me, that's a lot of people. If you think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of people, maybe even more than 1 million that are on LinkedIn at this point, what is going to set you apart from somebody else? It's that personal touch. And it's a little more difficult now to network at meetups, user groups, and conferences because everything is going virtual. Like right now, you can't even see me. That really bugs me. I'm a very emotive person. I like to be able to talk, but I can't get the video to work. But if I were at a conference, we would be able to have a conversation afterward and really get to know people, exchange business cards, find out what each other's interests are and how we might be able to help each other in the future. So it's important that when you ask somebody to connect with you, either on LinkedIn or in the real world, that you provide them with a little bit of information about yourself, and that you ask those people that you've developed relationships with for introductions. And I have seek mentorship here in italics because it's quite important to get that early on in your career. Now, I wouldn't say walk up to somebody and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Because that's a lot of pressure, right? That's a whole lot of pressure. But when you have established relationships with somebody over time, thank them and say, you may not know this, but you've been a mentor to me and I really appreciate it. And any information that you can give me about how I can improve myself to make myself a better job candidate, please let me know. So networking, I cannot like that. It's a joke, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know, except that's not a joke. That's the real world. And I didn't understand that in my undergrad, which is why I came out with an undergrad or with a bachelor in geography, and I sold meat at a butcher shop for 2 years and then became a bartender. That was not exactly using my degree because I didn't make an effort to try and get to know people in the field. So user groups and professional organizations, there are a lot of them. And depending on what your interests are or what direction you want your career to go in, determines which professional groups you should look at. So if you're still in school, the American Association of Geographers is a really good one. That's an academic conference that takes place once a year with over 10,000 attendees. I've went to 2 AAGs, and the reason why this is good is, to be honest, they don't really say no to people. So if you present at a conference, you've got that on your resume forever, even if nobody shows up. I presented in 2016 at AAG in Boston. It was raining. I remember that. I also remember that nobody showed up to my presentation except for my professor. But that was okay because you know what's on my resume? That I presented at AAG in 2016, and that looks really good on your resume. URISA, the Urban Regional Information Systems Association, is probably one of the larger GIS groups specifically. It is software agnostic and also raster and vector agnostic. So whereas the ASPRS, the American Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, that deals almost exclusively with photogrammetry, LiDAR, DEM, and other raster-derived GIS. ERISA is more along the vector side. So that is more along the municipal clients or municipal people who are doing GIS in state, city, and local government. GITA is another really important one. This is one that Drew is part of, the Geospatial Information and Technology Association. I associate this more with tech and public safety, but that's not necessarily the case. And then the American Congress on Surveying and Mapping. If you're coming into GIS from the surveying side, you may want to make sure that you go ahead and join that professional organization, because if you're going to be a surveyor, you want to be able to meet other professional land surveyors. CAGIS is honestly, that acronym is used a lot in the GIS world, but in this particular case, this is the Cartography and GIS Special Users Group. And then the AGS, again, is more of a overarching national, more of an academic conference. So I do have the GIS Certification Institute with the GISP patch listed there. And this is increasingly, as you have a career in GIS, having those letters behind your name means a lot. And in part because you used to just be able to get the certification by proving that you had worked in GIS for a certain amount of time and that you had, submit a portfolio to the organization. Now there's an exam involved, and it's hard. It's real hard. Most people don't pass it the first time. I was incredibly lucky to pass it the first time because I set up a huge study group with about 25 people online where we were all able to share resources and pool resources. So again, that networking, it's very important. I still maintain contact with those people, even though some of us took the exam at the same time, some of us took it at a later date, and some of us did and did not pass. So there are a lot of organizations out there, and I highly recommend that you look into those and the user groups. So in Ohio, I'm the president of the Southwestern Ohio GIS Users Group, or SWOGIS. We have Guano, they literally call it Guano, which is the GIS user group of Northern Ohio. I don't know why you would name yourself after bat poop, but okay. And there are 6 or 7 others throughout the state as well. And these are generally going to be places where you can get to meet people that you might actually be working with. So as the SWOGIS president, I've got about 280 people on my mailing list, and they know who I am and I know who they are. And that really helps in your job search later on. So with these groups, don't just pay dues. You actually want to participate. You want to join committees. You want to present at conferences or webinars. And I'll tell you, the fastest way to get over fear of presenting is to just do it, because not everybody's going to stand up there and do it. Not everybody's going to do it and be good at it, but doing it at all is practice for you to get good at it. So again, right now with the pandemic, it is a little bit more difficult to attend some of these items, but fortunately, GIS lends itself very well to online congregation, because so much of what we do is computer-based anyways. So definitely join LinkedIn groups. Check out mentorship programs. There's GeoMentors through, I believe, AAG. There are quite a few different mentorship groups that you can get your name out there in. And then make sure that you record this, like that you record that you attended this webinar, or that you presented at this webinar, or that you have been involved in this organization for 3 years, and that you were on the conference planning committee, because these organizations really are looking for people to help run these events, because everybody's busy. Let's just put it that way. Everybody's busy. So the more people that are involved, the better these events will be. So as a hiring manager, what I'm looking for in GIS, there's a couple different skill sets, and the GIS skill set is what you see on this screen. Okay, like depending on what it is that you need to be doing, like if you're going to be doing remote sensing, then you need to have that kind of skill set. If you want to be creating maps, you need to have a cartography background. If you want to be creating web maps and applications, then you need to be familiar with ArcGIS Online and what WebGIS is. And right now, the big shift in the field is going from, if you are an Esri user, which most people are, and we'll talk about open source in a second, you've got ArcMap and you have ArcGIS Pro. And right now, Esri is no longer developing new skill or new data sets or new tasks and abilities in ArcMap, just in ArcGIS Pro. So it's important to try and learn both if you can, but understand that due to IT restraints, especially in the United States government, especially in the Department of Defense, you may not be able to be using the latest and greatest of what you're learning in GIS, because it may be that the servers can only support ArcMap 10.3. So it's important that you be able to have a working knowledge of both of those. Fortunately, Esri has a wonderful training program that most students can access for free, and you can even sign up for your own ArcGIS online account and take advantage of some of these trainings. With regard to open source, it depends on who you talk to and where you're going to work. In academia, open source is very important. Overseas, like in Europe, open source is incredibly important. QGIS and GRASS are very, very common. In the United States, most places have begun to transition to the Esri environment. And this is because you have a huge development team working on every facet of GIS at one time to be able to provide a really rich project or rich product that allows you to make some really fantastic stuff with limited work. Open source, that is not necessarily the case. I'm also not necessarily the best source of information about that because I don't use open source GIS. I am firmly an Esri gal, that is me. And then GPS and data collection, this is also very important. It's a really good way to get your foot into the door doing GIS, is going out and being somebody who collects information in the field, either as a special project employee at a consulting firm or going to work for a utility themselves. So I have CAD in here as well because that's commonly something that people want to see, but early in your career, it's unlikely that you're going to be specializing in both unless you come from an engineering background. So I can't stress enough that just try and illustrate as much as you can that you do have these skill sets, and if you don't, work toward them and let people know that you are working toward them when you're looking at jobs. I said before, you can come in from a geography background or an IT background. If you're going to do GIS as a verb and not use GIS as a tool, you need to understand some of the things on this page. Database skills. You need to know what database is. You need to know what a feature class is, why you can use SQL and not MySQL for spatial relational database management systems. What Oracle is. It's unlikely that you're going to come across it in your early career, but if you know Oracle, you can make bank in this field. And increasingly, knowledge of ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Server is important. But again, early in your career, probably the most important thing is to be able to understand code when looking at it, specifically Python and JavaScript. W3 Schools and Code Academy are both excellent websites to hone your programming skills. I'm not going to call myself a programmer. I develop applications using graphical user interfaces, but I'm not going to sit down and code. But if you show me code, I can probably find what the problem is because I am used to it at this point in looking at it and being able to understand what does and does not work. And then basic troubleshooting steps. If you call somebody and say, my stuff isn't working, it's probably helpful for you to be able to tell them, I've already turned it on and off, I've restarted the computer, I've restarted the service, I've done this. So having understanding of that basic troubleshooting is very important. And then last but not least, certainly not least, an understanding of logic. And what I mean is the difference between and or statements, or if then statements, or Boolean logic. This helps you derive meaningful information from a GIS table by understanding what you can filter out in order to see just what you want to see. So highly important. And then more and more, there's stuff in the cloud, but again, early career, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to be expected to come straight out of the box to be able to do that. But I can't stress enough, database skills are so important. And I will say that on LinkedIn Learning, there's a course by Simon Allardyce, Allardice, and he does an excellent beginning SQL class and beginning database class to help you understand what a database really is so that you can speak intelligently about it when you are in your job search. And then this is probably the most important of all of them, right? How many times do you see on a job description must be able to communicate clearly, right? This is so important. So soft skills, unfortunately, these take the most time to develop. We are all in school and we write these amazing long papers, expository essays about some research topic that we've looked at. So my first week as a consultant, I opened up my email and I wrote somebody what would probably be the equivalent of a 2 to 3 page email. And I got no response. And you know why? Because we are all way too busy for that. So one of the things that you need to reframe in your mind is how you're communicating with people when you're coming out of school. Ain't nobody got time for that. I say that over and over. Ain't nobody got time for that. Like, I do not have time to read your 6-page long email because it's probably going to require a 4-page long reply. And so learn how to write concisely, to engage people, and make sure that you are asking the right questions. And I highly recommend, I believe it's either Penn State or Purdue's online writing laboratory, OWL. They have a free, some coursework there for how to write concisely. And that's very, very important when you are beginning your career, to make sure that you're not wasting your time or anybody else's. And the better you get at it, the faster you are at it, and the more people you can end up communicating with. Engagement. This is hard, right? I mean, we're all straight out of school. We're tired. It's been a long time coming, but you've got to be engaged in your job. Showing that you can be reliable and punctual. This is super important. I don't know how to, I mean, like, how can you be unreliable and expect to have a good upward trajectory in your career? And then patience. So I want to be clear. This is a journey, not a destination. I have not reached the destination of patience. Okay, it'll be a journey forever. Just like anxiety, there's never a destination with that. Life's a journey, not a destination. So learn how to be patient and when to make your moves. And sometimes that just means sitting down and shutting up for the first year. Not always, but it can mean that you just need to get your feet underneath you, especially after coming out of school. Learn how to read a room. Walk in. If you are talking to, and you know, as a woman, this happens to me. If I'm in a meeting room and I have one of my employees who's male in there with me, and somebody walks in who doesn't know me and they start talking to him like he's the one in charge, they did not do a very good job of reading that room. And do you think I want to do business with that person or hire them? No, I do not. So get good at reading a room and determining with your judgment how you need to be treating people. Approach people. What is it? It's the adage is treat people how they want, or how you would want to be treated. But the actuality is you want to treat people how they want to be treated. So if I want to be treated with respect and you come in and you're treating me with familiarity, that's because you would like to be treated that way. That doesn't necessarily going to work for me. So that's where you need to develop good judgment and learn how to read a room. And GIS fortunately lends itself very well to this, but you have to be able to think critically. You have to be able to look at something and poke holes in your own hypothesis immediately and understand, how are other people going to poke holes in this? How can I prove to myself that this is the reality of the situation? How can I make sure that I'm not thinking emotionally? Because GIS is a very data-driven field, right? It helps us make data-driven decisions. But you have to be able to think that way. And again, this ties back into needing to know that logic in order to really succeed in this field. And just in general in life, you want to be perceived as a critical thinker, not somebody who is easily swept in by other people's ideas. So office skills, obviously anything Microsoft Office, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. I have Excel starred here because when you do GIS as a profession, Excel is probably going to be the most commonly used intermediary between a database and a non-database data product. And so it's very important to develop those Excel skills. And again, LinkedIn Learning has some amazing classes. There are certifications you can get in Excel. So I highly recommend that you look into some of those. And I also do a webinar about cleaning dirty data with GIS. And the slides for that with a lot of good information are on my LinkedIn page. So if that's something that you're interested in, be sure to reach out to me on LinkedIn, but only if you send me a message when you try to connect with me that lets me know that that's what you're looking for. And then I have Google on here because I can't tell you how frustrating it is to have a new employee who asks me every 5 minutes how to do something when they literally have not Googled, how do I do this thing? I like to joke that the reason I'm good at my job is because I'm good at finding things. I'm good at finding information. And so it's very important that you be able to learn how to use your search engines and GeoNet, which is Esri's knowledge base, and GIS Stack Exchange, which is another more programming based, but another knowledge base for GIS. And on Reddit, there's some amazing GIS tips on Reddit as well. But you have to know how to look for that stuff, and you have to know how to quickly parse through the morass of information that comes back at you to find the piece, find the web page that you're looking for. So get good at searching. And now that's not to say don't ask questions when you're new, because obviously that's not the case. But if it's specifically like how do I do X and Y, try Googling. Literally just Google, how do I display X, Y in ArcMap? And you'll probably find what you need, and that will make you appear resourceful and that you know what it is you're looking for. So we've talked a little bit about LinkedIn. The job search is, things change rapidly not in this field, just in the job industry and in general. So, when I first started looking at jobs 15 years ago, I was looking at monster.com, probably not where I'm going to go today. First place I'm going to look at is LinkedIn, and I'm going to look at my network, because I have learned about a lot of opportunities through LinkedIn. Indeed.com is probably one of the largest and most far-reaching GIS or just job websites you can find. And then GIS Jobs Clearinghouse, jgc.org. This is great if you need to get a position filled quickly, like as a hiring manager, but keep in mind that you will receive hundreds of applications, because this is an international website. And when I post jobs that I need to get filled on JGC, I'm literally inundated with hundreds of applications. So you'll need to really work on your resume to make that stand out when comparing those. For government jobs, you've got usajobs.gov for federal jobs, and then governmentjobs.com for state, local, county, and some federal jobs as well. I have job fairs and job boards starred on here, because if you are still in an academic program, more and more academic programs are definitely helping people connect with people in the workplace to get jobs. So it's very important that if you have those resources available to you, please use them, because it's hard to find GIS postings. Most of the time they get posted singly here and there. Like there might be one job in Fairborn, Ohio this week, and another one in Toledo next week, and another one in Cleveland the next week. But those aren't all just showing up on this is your GISjob.com. Like you actually have to go look for these. And so utilize any resources that you have available to you through your school. Professional organizations are another one. I'm a member of Women in GIS. I get emails once a month with jobs that have been sent there. As president of SWOGIS, the Southwestern Ohio GIS Users Group, I send out these notifications each week of new jobs. Conferences and trade shows. I hired somebody who literally found a posting I had put on an actual bulletin board with actual piece of paper with an actual thumbtack holding it down at a conference. And then automate your job search alerts. So keep in mind, if you are searching for the word GIS in a job search, you're going to get back anything with GIS in the word, such as biologist, psychologist, anything that ends with a GIST, geologist. So you might also consider looking for words like spatial, SPATIAL, or geospatial, or some sites are getting a little bit more sophisticated so that you can search for GIS in particular, but just keep in mind that can be a little bit frustrating. You're like, I don't want to be a lab technologist or information technologist. I'm looking for GIS. And then ask your friends and coworkers. Peers are probably a better way to put that. You may be friends with people you work with, but they are your peers. And then individual agency and company websites are another option for finding jobs. Now, I could literally go on for an hour about resumes, and I have, but in the interest of time, I'm going to make this pretty quick. Your resume needs to be one page. This is not a CV. This is not an academic curriculum vitae. Like, I do not need 7 pages. I have time to read one page. What you want me to see needs to be on the front of that page. The most important stuff needs to be on the top of that page. So if you are banking on your education being your way in, then you need to put your education at the top. If you're banking on previous project experience to put you in, you need to put that on top. If you are posting your resume to LinkedIn or to Indeed or any other website, take your mailing address and phone number off of it. There are bots that will go through and scrub these websites looking for information, and you will end up on more mailing lists than you want to. In that vein, I recommend having a separate email address that you use to try and find a job. I don't need to see cutiebooty1998@gmail.com. I am not hiring you if I see cutiebooty1998 or I like to drink for you @yahoo.com. Okay. You want to make sure that your email address is readily identifiable as you. Mine is kawright@gmail.com. Real simple. I do have, others like Joe and Kelly are awesome @gmail.com. I'm not going to use that to try and get a job, but it's important that your email address also does not reveal personal details about you. For example, my husband, his online name for PlayStation, because he was like 19 when he set it up, has his birthday in it. It has his name and his birthday. Don't give people that information. I don't need to know that you're 17 or 18 years old. I don't need to know that you like to drink on the weekends. So definitely make sure that you are using a professional sounding email address. And I have it in red, guys, spelling and grammar. I understand that there are a lot of international applicants, but and that a lot of people who do not have English as a first language. But if you are applying for a job in the United States or in an English-speaking country, your resume had better not have any mistakes on it. Because if I see mistakes on that, I'm going to think, wow, this person, if they're trying to get a job and they're not willing or able to correct their spelling and grammar, how are they going to be communicating with my clients? How is that going to work? And so I can't stress to you enough how you need to make sure that spelling and grammar is correct. On your resume, I know this sounds like really simplistic. Focus on your strengths. Obviously, don't put anything like, I'm not good at this on my resume, but really lean into those strengths. Your project or your past work descriptions, they need to be concise. They need to be descriptive, and they need to be targeted. And what I mean by targeted is you need to actually be using keywords from the job posting in every single resume that you put in. So yes, that means a new resume for every job that you are applying for. It's okay to have a simple template that you can use, but a template is not your resume. It's a template that you can use to customize your resume for every single job. So, well, can you do 2-page resume? Yes, you can. But if somebody doesn't flip over to that second page, what are they going to be missing? So think about that. And since I talk about real estate, okay, your resume, it's one piece of paper. If you look at the sample that's here, that is a very narrow margin, because that means that I can fit a third again as much text on the same page. I'm not using a huge font. I'm trying to fill as much of the page as possible by making it as wide as possible. Is it text heavy? Yes. But does it have everything on there that I want my prospective employer to see? Absolutely. And that's the important part. So with your one page of real estate, you need to make it count. So before the job, you need to gather your information together. Get your previous employment information. I recommend a spreadsheet for this that you can just add to forever, or Google Sheet, Google Docs, something like that that you can add to forever. So I have starting and ending salary starred here because it's important for you to know that, but in several states in the United States, and it is illegal for your new employer to ask you what you made at your former employment. And I would argue that regardless of whether or not it's illegal, it is nobody's business what you made at your previous job. It will have zero bearing on what you are capable of doing or what your value is to the new place that you're trying to work. So recently when I was applying for a job, it asked me for my salary and I put in $1 for the year because it is nobody's business. Now, if you are a public servant, that is a little bit different. A lot of times that information is publicly available, but you should definitely check into whether or not it's actually required in your state or legally allowed, if somebody's legally allowed to ask you what you made before. So get your starting and ending salary, what your job duties were, and your position descriptions, and a list of professional references. You don't provide the list of professional references until it's asked for, but it's good to have people that you know you can put in there in a pinch. And these are people that you may have worked with in the past, either at a job or on a project. Professors, I had professors as my references, or other professionals that you meet in the industry. So if you have a mentor, that person can also be a reference on your resume. Education, you need to have your dates. You need to have official transcripts and any publications that you did or any awards that you won while you were in school. And then endorsements is more of like a LinkedIn thing. People can write endorsements for you. And then last but not least, review your social media. A lot of places are looking online at your Facebook. And yes, we live in a country where you have the freedom to say whatever you want, but that does not mean you are free of consequences for saying those things. And if your Facebook is 15 years old and it shows you doing a keg stand and that comes up in your My Memories and somebody likes that photo and they see that, now they're looking at, wow, this person is doing a keg stand. So you want to review and scrub your social media. For the job application itself, give yourself time and be selective with the information you provide. So that means make sure that you're not revealing any protected information. So it's nobody's allowed to ask you, oh, that's an interesting accent. Where are you from? How many kids do you have? How do you think that you're going to handle childcare? Have you had cancer before? Or I see I see you've had cancer, and how will that affect your work performance? So these are questions that they're not legally allowed to ask you, but you don't want to be volunteering that information either. So be selective with the information that you provide. A resume does not replace an application, and most places will actually say that, like you have an official application you have to fill out and they want you to submit a resume. And 9 times out of 10, GPA does not matter, okay? So unless you're trying to get into grad school or you're going to a place where academics really matters to them, don't waste space on your resume putting your GPA on there. Nobody matters. It doesn't matter. Did you finish? That's all that matters. And then don't lie, but maybe church it up a little bit. Make yourself look good. Think like, how would you write this? How would you write your job duties? Like, yeah, I edited stuff in databases for 6 months. That's not sexy, okay? You can make it a little bit sexier than that to get them to take a second look at your resume. And I recommend that you take a look at some samples online to find out how you can do that. And recycle other people's resumes. If it works for you and they wrote it well, why not? Recycle the job posting from a previous job you've had. Why not? No issue. Keep copies of everything. And then if you, there are times when you might want to write a cover letter, and I would suggest that you do a little bit of internet research to determine whether or not you write a cover letter. But make sure that if you do, that you're not using the same one for every job that you apply for, because don't do what I did and write a cover letter to somebody and have the wrong company name on the letter. Needless to say, I did not get an interview for that job. So at the interview, you do want to LinkedIn stalk people before you go in. You want to show up to the interview. You want to come 5 to 10 minutes early, but not 15 to 20 minutes early. We all are busy. We ain't got time for that. Dress nicely, no wrinkles. Thank them at the beginning and end of the interview for their time and opportunity to interview. I have shake hands highlighted here because right now things are a little weird. You know, maybe you don't want to shake hands, kind of read the room, maybe do an elbow bump, maybe just kind of wave at somebody or say, hey, you know what, we'll shake hands when all this is over. Make sure you bring copies of your resume and work samples if you have it. I'm always impressed if somebody shows up with an actual portfolio to show me. And it's very important that you ask questions of them and then actively listen. Somebody on LinkedIn that talks a lot about active listening is Dan Oblinger, O-B-L-I-N-G-E-R. He has written several books about active listening, and I have learned so much from him in the last couple of years about how to really stop thinking about what I'm going to say next and really start absorbing what it is that people are saying. So I highly recommend that. And then you need to prepare for this job. So you need to think about the questions that they're going to ask you and kind of come up with some answers, and even Google in most common interview questions just to get some preparation. Both my husband and I recently went through an interview process where we spent literal days preparing for our interviews, and we both got our jobs. So it was a really good deal. But it was clear that we had prepared far more than the other candidates. So you want to be that person. You don't want to be the person that doesn't prepare. And then you want to follow up about 24 to 48 hours with a written thank you, reiterating that you want the job, and provide any additional information that you feel that you were not able to cover in the interview. Say, I know I'm the best candidate for this job because of A, B, and C. I realize that we were not able to cover D, E, and F, but I wanted to make sure that you understand my experience with G, H, and I makes me the best candidate for this job. Thank you very much. If you don't send a follow-up and somebody else does, that indicates to the interviewer that the other person is more interested in you than the job. So make sure you follow up. But don't bring a card with you to the interview and give it to them there. Wait 24 to 48 hours. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to go through all of this, but yeah, don't be late. Don't text during the interview. Bring your phone if you need to schedule something, right? But don't have it on the table. I'm a former smoker. I'm mortified to think about how I smelled when I walked into interviews before. And because of that, I definitely would recommend that you not wear perfume or cologne. We've all had that coworker that just douses themselves in cologne and you can smell them 6 rows away. If I'm wearing a mask and I can smell you, you're wearing too much. So keep that toned down for your interview. Don't chew gum. Jeans is highlighted or starred because there are some jobs where it's appropriate to wear jeans to the interview, most of the time not. Do not complain about past or current jobs or talk about other job offers. And then I really struggle with this one because I'm a conversation dominator, but I gotta make sure that I'm actively listening and asking questions and letting them answer those questions rather than dominating the conversation. Don't lie, you will get caught. Do not talk about religion, drinking, politics, or relationships. Don't reveal information that could be used to rule you out as a candidate. If they find out you have 4 kids, then they might be like, oh, wow, maybe this person isn't going to be able to be reliable. And that could be the farthest from the truth, but you have now provided them with something that they can unconsciously, or it's part of unconscious bias that they can use unconsciously against you. So don't provide that information for free, basically. And I don't want to hear about you saying, oh, well, my car payment is so expensive, I need to have higher pay. Nope, I'm not interested. Straight up, not interested. That is not my problem that you bought a car that's too expensive. Also, that makes it look like you can't manage your money. So don't say you don't want or need the job. Do not ask about drug testing. So you may make discreet inquiries about that before, or how about this? Just don't do any of that stuff before the drug test. And don't, again, reveal protected class information, which is, you should Google what protected class information is in interviewing to understand the things that you do not need to be providing information about. And we're getting close to the end here, which is good. I can't stress enough that we don't learn enough about this in school. You need to negotiate. If you get an offer, you are expected to negotiate. Even in places where you're not expected to negotiate, what is the worst that can happen if you ask for more money? They say no. And this graph here illustrates what happens if you start at $40,000, $50,000, or $60,000 a year, and what difference that makes in compounding interest over time in your career if you leave that money on the table. So if you start at $40,000 and don't ask for that $10,000 raise to $50,000, you could be leaving as much as $1 million on the table over the course of your career in terms of compounding interest. And this is something that you need to understand. You can't afford to not negotiate. Nobody will stand up for you but you. You're the only one who is advocating for you, and you need to do it yourself. That person in the mirror, you need to pump yourself up and be like, I know I'm worth this. And you're going to ask what you're worth for, or what you think you're worth. And then when they offer you something slightly less than, then you can come to an agreement. I also give a negotiating success for women in GIS webinar, and I have that PowerPoint presentation on my LinkedIn as well. That's a 2-hour workshop that I give. During the job transition, yes, ask questions, please. Do not screw up and then 6 months later realize you screwed up and it was a big deal. Say thank you. Speak up. If you think that something is being done kind of in a dumb way, find a way to privately discuss it with your supervisor and find out if there's something you can do to make things a little more streamlined. And then put on a professional persona every day like you do a uniform. Okay, this is a superhero uniform that you're putting on. Do I want to wear a suit jacket right now? You can't see it. I'm wearing a suit jacket. It is not comfortable. I do not like it. Fortunately, it is a webinar, so I'm wearing jeans and you can't see that because you also can't see my camera. But understand that you need to put that on every day, your persona every day. You're not going to be you at your job. You're going to be you as a professional at your job. And you need to balance ambition with patience. So a lot of us believe, hey, I got this degree. I'm going to get in here. I'm going to skyrocket to the top. I'm going to make $100,000 in 4 years. Well, I wish you luck with that, because there are other people who are already there who have been doing the grind and embracing the suck for a long time. And they are not going to be happy to hear that you're going to come in and make 100 grand in 4 years. So you need to balance that ambition with patience and understand that it does take time to get where you're at. That's what experience is. Experience equals time. So embrace the suck, give yourself time to adjust. It is a hard transition to make, going from school to work. Even something as simple as sitting for 40 hours a week, you don't realize what that's going to do to your butt. I mean, like, A, it's going to get bigger because you're not going to be walking around as much, and B, you might have tailbone issues. So definitely make sure that you are recognizing the changes that are going on in your life. Imposter syndrome, recognize it. I mean, again, it's a journey. It's not something you'll ever necessarily get over. I hope you don't feel this way. But if you have imposter syndrome, make sure that you are able to overcome that, and don't downplay your successes. Like, if you have been successful, write it down, update your resume every 6 months, even if you're not looking for it, because it helps you to understand what you've done, where you've come, and how far you've come. And then give yourself a break. School was hard, but so is work. So keep that in mind. Final thoughts, be persistent and be patient, like we were talking about. But if things aren't working out for you, be willing to change jobs. I am in a place in my career where I am now changing jobs after that first big jump from ODOT into consulting. And whether you like it or not, you have to sell yourself. You're the only person advocating for you. And unfortunately, I'm going to say unfortunately, GIS never stops evolving. So at this point, Esri is updating things every quarter. And there's a lot of different things that they're updating. So you have to keep learning because you will get left behind. And lastly, there will always be another job. If you get an offer and you're like, this is terrible, this is a horrible offer, I don't want this, there will always be another job. Do not sell yourself short and don't rush it. So with that, here's my contact information. I have both my professional and my personal email here and my LinkedIn link. I hope to hear from all of you in the future. And before I open it up for questions, I do have this slide that DataMark asked me to put in here to plug their second annual public safety conference. You can get more information at eventsquid.com/event/12195. So thank you very much. And Drew, I'm going to turn it over to you for questions.
Kelly, thank you so much. As always, so much great and just rich information to throw in there. This is one of my favorite presentations that Kelly does because I think it's great for early career professionals, people that are just getting out of college, people that are transitioning careers, or people that are looking to maybe change jobs. This has all the information that you need. And we do have time for a couple of questions. I'm going to apologize ahead of time and tell you guys I can't get to all of them. But Kelly, if you'll go back to your information, I want to leave that up for a little bit. And I encourage everybody, reach out to Kelly. Go to LinkedIn, send her a connection, put that message in there, and she will get back to you. So are there any other resources like LinkedIn Learning or something else that can teach people or prepare people to negotiate salaries?
Yeah, there are some fantastic books. What I did was I actually decided I wanted to do a conference presentation about negotiation because we don't learn about this in school. And I don't have the stack of them in front of me, but if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can get you some links to those books. Most of what I found had to do with books that I got off of Amazon, and then also the Harvard Program on Negotiation, PON. They have some fantastic articles in there that teach you a little bit about negotiation, about what your BATNA is, about what all the words are that you need to be aware of, and how to overcome objections during negotiation. So I recommend the Harvard Program on Negotiation.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's all. And I'm going to do a little plug in here just with negotiating. Don't always think that salary is the only thing that you can negotiate. There are so many different aspects of a job offer that you can negotiate, like PTO or time off or vacation days.
Or working remotely.
So think through, exactly, working remotely, flexible scheduling. As Kelly stated, the worst thing that can happen is they say no.
Yeah.
So the answer is already no if you don't ask. And then I've got a great question here, Kelly, related to someone that's changing careers and is a recent graduate. Is there any need to list anything that's not related to IT or GIS on a resume if you're changing fields into GIS? So let's say you're coming from construction and want to focus on GIS, but you haven't done a lot of GIS.
So at that point, what I would look for is look through the job posting description. And you're going to look for keywords in there because a lot of these jobs, especially at the state level and above, they are being scanned by AI. Your resume is being looked at by artificial intelligence, and they're going to be actually looking for matches to the keywords. So if you can use any of your past or your previous employment experience to satisfy some of the requirements of the job that may not necessarily be GIS related, but are related to communication or technology or innovation, then you can certainly, and you should put that experience on there. I've had like 23 jobs. I've slung fish, like I said, at a fish store. I can find a reason to put that on my resume if it's at all closely related to the job posting itself, because you learn those soft skills at all of those jobs, and having that soft skill experience is sometimes more valuable than the technical experience itself.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And then we spent quite a bit of time, and I really appreciate it, talking about mentorship. Got a ton of questions related to where to go to look for mentors. And so I kind of want to ask that question. What's your advice to someone who's looking for or seeking out a mentor? What would you encourage that person to do to find a mentor?
The first thing is Google GIS mentorship, or find one of those professional organizations and see if they have mentorship programs. But it could be just as simple as reaching out to a professor that you had, or somebody that you saw at a webinar, or somebody that you met at a conference or at a luncheon, and saying, hey, I'm looking for mentorship in this field. Is there anyone that you can recommend? Because let me tell you, it is so flattering and rewarding to have somebody ask you for help. Mm-hmm. And so if you ask someone to help you learn, to help you find a mentor, they will probably be able to give you the name of a couple of people, and flattery gets you everywhere. And I don't mean butter them up, but I do mean like, hey, I really appreciated seeing what you did on this one project, or I really appreciated what you said in this post. Do you think we could sit down sometime or have 30 minutes Zoom chat, because I'm really trying to begin my career and I'm trying to get some career direction. Now, if you just come up to me and say, hey, Kelly, I need you to be my mentor, I'm probably going to say no, because I have a lot of mentees already. And so it's important to ask somebody if they know anyone else that might be able to help. And then if they themselves are available, then they can provide you with that help. But there are some really good programs like through AAG. And with a lot of these, you don't even have to be a member. You can actually just join the mentorship programs themselves.
Absolutely. And since we've pointed to LinkedIn a lot, I'll encourage you guys, really start engaging with LinkedIn, and, you know, follow some of these folks that are creating a ton of content like Kelly on LinkedIn, and reach out to them with a message and say, hey, I really liked your message on this. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. And that can develop into a mentorship.
Yes.
So many different opportunities. Kelly, we still have more questions, but we are out of time. Guys, if you have a question and we didn't get to it, reach out to Kelly on LinkedIn.
Please do.
I promise you she will answer your question. With that, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Kelly, as always, you are amazing. I love your energy, and I love the content that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Drew. I appreciate it, and I appreciate DataMark GIS making this an option for me. So thank you so much.